Hi there, I'm Instant Miso, creator of the webtoon Siren's Lament, and today I will be doing a Q&A. I asked some of my followers on Instagram to give me some questions, and I'm going to answer them here, so thanks to all of you who participated. Alright, just to give a fair warning, this audio will contain spoilers. I'm actually doing this in celebration of completing Siren's Lament, so if you haven't read the ending, there will be spoilers. Just a heads up. You've been warned. I've also noticed I've been asked a lot of questions I've definitely answered before, so if I don't answer a certain question here, I would highly advise checking out an interview I did with Girl Wonder Podcast just a few months ago. You could look her up on the podcast app. I personally listen to her on Spotify, but I believe she also has a SoundCloud, so please check her out. Jo is a really lovely person who makes quality podcasts about webtoons, so definitely give her stuff a listen. With that said, let's get on to answering your questions. And I also apologize in advance if I mess up your name or username, but anyway, here we go. So I'm going to start with some of the more upvoted questions and then kind of sort through the rest, so hopefully this goes well. Zero Tuna asks, how are you feeling emotionally about the comic ending? I'm a little sad, but mostly happy. I think I would have been unhappy if I dragged the series out longer than I needed to. Plus, I'm really excited about starting my next project, which leads into one of the more most asked questions. Will you be making another webtoon after Siren's Lament? So the answer to that is yes. I've already started on it, and it's called Eternal Nocturnal. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a fantasy romance that revolves around a dream eater who meets an insomniac. But anyway, back to Siren's Lament. This is a Siren's Lament Q&A. My dudes, it's Wednesday. Nice username, asks, how did you come up with such an original idea / twist / design for Sirens and the Sirens myth? I feel like I answer this question a lot. Sirens in mythology are usually these bad, evil creatures, but I simply asked myself, hey, what if they were the victims? And I essentially started to build that idea from there. That's how the whole idea came into play, from that one simple question. Natterdo asks, who is the easiest character to draw in the story? To be honest, I think I'm going to have to say it's Ian. Ian is the easiest character to draw, just because of his color palette, and he wears the least amount of clothes most of the time. C Page asks, did you already have the ending planned out when you first started Siren's Lament? So the answer to that is yes and no. From the very beginning, I had a general idea that the end would be overall like confronting the Poseidon / Ophelia. So while I had a general plan for the story, I found myself in most cases just refining as I kept writing or editing, or like sometimes in some cases changing it. But let's get into more character-based questions. 7 Honey Chip asks, when are the main three's birthdays or just their zodiac signs? So, personally, I'm the type of writer who doesn't give my characters birthdays. I remember actually seeing a really funny post where someone was like, I'm an opposite J.K. Rowling. Don't ask me my characters' birthdays or anything because I don't know. Yeah, but to be honest, I did write their birthdays down somewhere, but I don't really feel like digging that up in all my notes. It's just not really that important to me, really. But I could tell you the main 3 zodiac signs, and I believe Lyra was a Virgo. I think that doesn't come as a surprise to most people. Sean is a Taurus, and Ian is an Aries. On to the next question. Helen Yesterdam asks, how and where did you come up with these beautiful names? So, I think I mentioned this before, but Lyra comes from the word lyric. I wanted to look up ocean-related names, and I saw Caspian, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to cut off the first part and make it Ian. I know that's really lame, but like looking at my character, I designed Ian's character first before naming him, and it just seemed to fit. If you haven't noticed, I have a tendency to favor very short names because I know for a fact that they will be butchered if they're longer than 5. I mean, Emila's name is only 5 letters and people get it wrong all the time. Sean's name and spelling actually comes from a guy I actually had a crush on in one of my classes. We were acquaintances, so it's okay. He'll never know, like, ever. And I plan to keep it that way. Corey's name originates from, like, coral. It's like an ocean-related name. And the origin behind Tua's name is actually kind of messed up. In Hawaiian, it means behind one, and I chose it because I knew he'd get shot with a harpoon from behind. I know that's messed up, but it was good because I thought it was a good, name for him because he's a friend who could always get behind you and have your back. As for Pele, she was very close to being named Calypso, but I thought Pele was a much more fitting name for her because she's got a fiery personality, kind of like the lava goddess Pele from Hawaiian mythology. I think I mentioned before that Hona's name is inspired by my own grandmother, and Ophelia's name is a reference to Shakespeare's Ophelia in Hamlet. Shakina Phelps asks, what are the characters' ages? So it's mentioned several times in the story that Lyra is around 21, Sean is 25, and Ian turned into a siren when he was about 23 and stayed the same age just because of the curse. Corey is the same age as Lyra, of course, and I think Cohen is about 7 or 8. Something I've never mentioned before is that Pele and Tua are actually in their late teens. Pele is 18 and Tua is 19, but of course they stopped aging when they turned siren. So, yeah, they don't know their real ages, to be honest. As for Ophelia and Hona, they're just really old because they deliberately prolong their lives. But another fun fact is that Amila, who changes her name to Amy, is slightly younger than Lyra. If anything, she becomes like a little sister to Lyra. And while we're on the subject, I know that some people who are like, oh, but that's Lyra's mom, that's weird. And so is Ian like her stepdad now? I want to remind those people that Amila or Amy didn't want to be a mother and will never want to be one. Lyra is mature enough to respect that and wouldn't want to thrust that burden onto her, especially now that Amy is a normal young woman happily living life for herself. So while some people aren't very happy that she's back, I personally think that Amy deserves a second chance at life, as for all the other characters. Bailey Annalise asks, what happened to Lyra's dad? I'm just gonna say it's safe to assume that he just goes on with his life after Amila goes missing, and he just remarries and grows old. He's for sure still a douche and an alcoholic, but I haven't decided if he's dead or not in present time, but I think ultimately I'd like to leave it ambiguous. Girl Child asks, what is your opinion on the curse and on the sisters' relationship? I actually thought it was really interesting how several readers thought that Hona was the antagonist and not Ophelia. I believe to some extent they're both at fault, Hona for being too overprotective and Ophelia being too naive. Because I look at Ophelia as this extreme hopeless romantic, and she starts off as this love-struck teenager, and after the tragedy of losing the guy that she loved, she convinces herself that she's doing the right thing by making a curse. I personally have 2 sisters. I'm the middle sister, so I know both sides of the spectrum of how it feels to be an older sister and a younger sister, so I actually really enjoyed writing their relationship. You can tell that they still loved each other, and Ophelia always considered Hona her weakness, and despite her running away from her sister for years, she still longed for that companionship deep down. MCatX asks, what was the most emotional chapter for you to write/draw? And the most fun chapter? Siren's Lament has a lot of emotional chapters, as you guys know, but one particular chapter I remember really taking a big toll on me was the one episode where Ian realizes that Amila was being abused by her husband. I was really emotionally drained after that week, so writing pretty depressing chapters does take a toll on, the creator, the person drawing it. At least for me. Of course, 179 was also a very emotional chapter because, Sean turns to sea foam, and that end scene where Lyra screams and her heart turns red was actually channeled from some very intense, crippling feelings I had earlier this year. It was just raw feelings of anger, distress, denial, and helplessness, which I wanted to convey all at once. And of course, one of the more funner chapters were definitely like Siren Shorts, or of course the ending where it's very happy. But moving on to the next question. Chibinas asks, is there a song you listen to that automatically makes you think of the series or any characters? So, I actually have my own playlist of songs that reminds me of Siren's Lament. I also asked my followers a while back to give me music on what songs remind them of the series, and I've definitely added some of those to my playlist, so thanks, guys. As for picking one song in general, I'm just gonna say that according to my Spotify, my top played song this year was Super Lonely by Benny, and I think that's actually very fitting. I'm gonna admit that I did listen to a lot of sad songs working on the climactic chapters of Siren's Lament, so I've been drawing depressing content for so long that it actually felt really weird drawing out all the happy moments at the end. While we're still on the subject of music and listening to stuff, I wanted to give you guys a fun little fact. So for the past year or so, I've been listening to Stephen King novels while I work. So it's funny because sometimes I look back on the chapters and think, oh yeah, I was listening to The Green Mile when I was drawing out that proposal scene. And let me tell you, The Green Mile is not a romantic story, by the way. It's like not a romantic story at all. I had an existential crisis once I finished that novel, but I really enjoy Stephen King's work. He's my favorite author right now. Sleep Deprived Artist asks, what are some things that you like/didn't like compared to producing Where Tangents Meet? So I'm going to be straight up honest. The last chapters of Where Tangents Meet, or during the last chapters of Where Tangents Meet, I just wanted it to be over and done with due to personal issues. I just wasn't happy writing it anymore. On top of that, WTM wasn't intended to be published like Siren's Lament was. Don't get me wrong, WTM will always have a special place in my heart, but, it's my first baby. It's what got me onto webtoons. But I honestly consider Siren's Lament to be my passion project. I remember I was often told that I didn't know how to write when I was publishing Where Tangents Meet. Or, that I wasn't capable of coming up with an original story, but Where Tangents Meet was literally based on a role play that I had done with my friends where we had no worries about some, overused tropes and cliches and whatnot. So something I really relish in, and forgive me for my pettiness, is the fact that when I did launch Sirens, all of those people who told me I couldn't write, they got real quiet. So I'm just saying. That's so petty, but I can't deny that I secretly love it. Anyway, the good thing is I was able to learn things from each of my series because, I'm still learning to be a better artist and a writer, and I will continue making mistakes, and I will continue to improve upon them. There are definitely things from Siren's Lament that I look back on now and I wish I could fix, but sometimes you just gotta put it behind you and roll with the punches and keep moving forward. There's definitely some elements in my next series that I want to improve on, and I'm really excited to share more stories with you guys. So here's a really short and random interlude, but I just want to explain that I actually recorded these questions and answers on different days, so if the audio or the pitch of my voice changes, I'm sorry. I'm either in my own room or my boyfriend's apartment trying to talk over the seagulls outside, so just please forgive me, okay? Anyway, moving on. I'm Anna Scafidi asks, did you ever get artist block? Oh, also, how long does it take to write and draw one episode? So, I think it's natural for anyone to get artist or writer's block. However, since webtoon creators have to submit on a sort of weekly basis, you can't really afford to get stuck. So, as bad as this sounds, I gotta admit that the stress and the anxiety alone would usually force me out of that rut. The huge downside to that is just not being able to produce things that I'm 100% satisfied with. And yeah, this is something I had to learn the hard way, is that, it's okay to take breaks if you're feeling burnt out. So just to any aspiring creators out there, I want you to know that it's totally okay to take breaks, and you shouldn't let anyone let you feel bad or guilty about it. With that said, though, Webtoon is really cool about their creators taking breaks if they really need to. I personally was just too stubborn to stop myself when I wasn't in the best of shape, but in time I learned that, hey, sometimes you just gotta stop and take a breather. But anyway, going back to the question, it usually takes 1 week to write and draw one episode. Of course, for the last 10 chapters, I spent about a month on each of them, and that's why I went on a 10-month hiatus. I feel like it did make a huge difference, and the quality and the art would definitely not have been the same if I was trying to get those chapters out week by week. And I'm really happy with the outcome. I'm actually really glad that I took the extra time and care to finish the series the way that I specifically wanted, and I think it paid off. Alright, so moving on to the next question. Sprinkes asks, have you ever thought about any alternate endings? This is interesting because I have thought about potential alternate endings, similar to how video games have alternate endings, like, a good ending and a bad ending and the best ending. So the bad ending would have been Lyra just completely losing her senses after Sean's death and joining forces with Ophelia. Ian would sadly remain miserable as their henchman, and they would just continue to live on forever. So, of course, yeah, that's the bad ending. Another alternate ending I imagined is actually the polyamorous route, where the three of them are happy as a throuple, and technically, I guess it would have ended after chapter 182. And yeah, honestly, those are the only alternate timelines I really saw in my head. But moving on. Huggy Was Here asks, what captivated me the most was the theme of accepting loss and unresolved ends to relationships, not allowing this past to swallow the future. Did you base this off an experience in your life? So, while I did want to execute those themes in my comic from the very start, I just so happened to ironically experience them firsthand while I was making the series. Siren's Lament is actually really personal to me because when I look back at certain chapters, I see them as different timestamps in my life, sort of, that, no one could ever possibly know about. For example, within the course of writing the series, I had my first romantic relationship. I remember looking back at certain chapters sometimes and thinking, oh, dang, that's when I had my first heartbreak. That was not a good time. Another example would be I actually lost my grandpa, who helped raise me, so I remember experiencing that type of heartbreak too. On the flip side, on a more positive note, I also experienced my own character growth. Like, from all of the heartbreak, I learned how to love myself and care for myself better, and I also learned that I could rely on my friends and my family in dark times, and luckily, I was also able to fall in love again, just all within the time span of publishing Siren's Lament, so it's pretty crazy. I know some people vocalize that they didn't like the ending and would have preferred that Sean had stayed dead, and apparently I ruined the message of moving on and that it was quote-unquote lazy writing on my part. I just want to say, while moving on is one of the themes of Siren's Lament, it's not the core message. It's actually about finding the strength to put yourself first, and especially in the face of loss and despair when it's easy to give in to those darker thoughts. You deserve to put yourself first, and just being able to embrace who you are is the main theme of the story. Even with that said, of course, people are still entitled to their own opinions. I know I can't please everyone, and I, by all means, am not the perfect writer, but overall, I just want my readers to take away something positive from the story. So, Moving on to the next question. Fuzzy Bottoms asks, were there any characters you thought of that didn't make the final cut? So, there may have been a few, but they weren't really important enough for me to remember or really sketch out. One character that I didn't write into the story, but I definitely thought of, was Ian's uncle, who basically was responsible for raising him. I was going to show a glimpse of Ian's childhood and background, but it actually wasn't too relevant to the main storyline, but I feel like now that I said it, you guys will probably demand a spin-off, but we'll see. I kind of want to work on other things right now, but who knows. Chewy Soda asks, do you think the art is more important than the story in creating a webtoon? I personally think that the story is more important. However, as someone who really, really enjoys drawing pretty things, I think I prefer a balance between the two. But in my honest opinion, the story itself should be prioritized. I feel like in most cases, webtoon creators don't really have the luxury to draw elaborate pictures for each panel, because imagine spending an hour on one single image only to have your reader skim over it for less than half a second. That's why a little part of me dies every time someone says, oh, this chapter was so short. It's like, but I worked really hard on it. But anyway, as a comic creator, you just have to be really smart and efficient about how you go about your process. And I personally would much rather read a simply drawn story with a rich message rather than a very intricately drawn story that's kind of just empty. I mean, I could admire the art still, but, where's the fun in that if there's not really any meaning behind it? It's a bonus if the art is really nice and the story is deep, which I always kind of try to aspire to achieve, but, that gets challenging. Especially if you're doing everything on your own. For the entirety of Siren's Lament, I drew and wrote the whole thing just on my own. I don't have any assistants, but, if you have the means to do that, which technically I could if I wanted to, but, I might consider in the future. I think it's just my perfectionist tendencies that get in the way and that I feel like I have to do everything myself, but hopefully I could get over that. Alright, so Moonscales20 asks, what was your favorite pic/panel you drew while making this comic? So the first image that comes to mind is the trio laughing in the shallow water when the curse is finally lifted at the end of chapter 182. I was listening to upbeat songs while I was drawing it, and I had a lot of fun. I just remember having a lot of fun drawing that particular image. Another scene that I also enjoyed from that same chapter is Sean and Lyra's kiss scene, where the sky is like a pastel color and the reflections are in the water. It was just really satisfying to finally pull that image out of my head and finally draw it out after planning it for so long. The funny thing that I'll always remember about that kiss scene is that I was actually drawing it at my boyfriend's apartment. And he looked over my shoulder and was like, oh, they're kissing. Maybe I could help you draw that scene better by kissing you. And I was like, June, I don't think it works that way. Get back to work. Because, we're both working from home and in quarantine and our desks are literally a few feet apart. So I always kind of remember him asking me that. But, he's the sweetest. Destiny asks, what were some of your original plans for the story? What behind-the-scenes parts were scrapped from the final uploads? So, like I've mentioned before, I've scrapped the bit with Ian's uncle. I think the most interesting one I could probably share is that in the first season, Aaliyah was actually supposed to fake her death in a motorcycle accident after Sean broke up with her. That way he could feel extremely guilty or heartbroken so that she could turn him into a siren and use him in her curse cycle. That's actually what she was trying to do in the first few chapters when she gets, quote-unquote, rejected from her interview as a fashion designer. there was never an interview. It was just an excuse and setup to help her stage an accident. However, in the beginning, in the very beginning, the first several chapters, Lyra's the one who tells Sean to go to her and comfort her. So, Aaliyah actually doesn't go through with her plan, and Lyra gets caught up in the Siren's curse and basically how the whole story unfolds. So with that, I think I could bring this Q&A to a close. Those are all the questions I'll be answering for this session. And, these are always fun to do, and hopefully I could keep interacting with you guys like this in the future. I know I said this on multiple occasions, but I am very convinced that I have the sweetest readers in the world, and I am so, so, so lucky. I feel like some writers have to worry about having toxic readers, but I had never, ever once felt that about you guys. You guys are so amazing. And I know I'm not very good at social mediaing or getting back to my messages, but I want you guys to know that I do hear you. And I know a lot of you have vocalized about Sirens Lament being your gateway into Webtoon, and that just makes me feel really, really honored. And, even if you're a reader who picked up the story only a month ago or yesterday, I want to thank you too. I also noticed that a lot of readers mention that Sirens Lament helped them through rough times, and hearing that just fills me with joy every time. To think that I was able to help someone through something I created is really great. I had a lot of questions asking if Sirens Lament will be available as a physical copy, and I would like to publish a hard copy, so if that ever happens anytime in the future, I'll be sure to let you guys know. But it's been a great privilege to create Sirens Lament and share it with you guys. I'm really looking forward to providing you guys with more stories to read, and I guess I'll see you in Eternal Nocturnal. So thanks for listening, and bye-bye.